Head to your pickup at Veggie Grill, Harvard Square.
Historians before then, he speaks with the voice of most of his profession when he concludes, unless the trustees of the Thomas Jefferson Memorial Foundation decide to exhume the remains and do DNA testing on Jefferson, as well as some of his alleged progeny, it leaves the matter a mystery about which advocates on either side can freely speculate, and surely will. Within the scholarly world, especially within the community of Jefferson specialists, there seems to be a clear consensus that the story is almost certainly not true. Within the much murkier world of popular opinion, especially within the black community, the story appears to have achieved the status of a self-evident truth. Mm-hmm. So that's what Ellis writes in 1996.
Yes.
Basically like, well, people tell this as a story and they seem to believe it, but there's really no, right? Yeah. 2 years after Ellis publishes his book, in 1998, Dr. Eugene Foster carried out a series of DNA tests. And I am not well qualified to discuss the specifics of how you do a DNA test. Yeah. But the result is that they found a genetic link between Jefferson and Hemings descendants. Someone with the Jefferson male Y chromosome fathered Eston Hemings, Sally's last child, born in 1808. About 25 adult Jeffersons existed at the time, and some of them did visit Monticello, but the study authors note the simplest and most probable conclusion was that Jefferson was the father. For years, Jefferson's descendants had tried to defend their sainted ancestor's name by alleging his nephews had fathered the children instead. But his nephews would have passed DNA to the Hemings from John Carr, their grandfather, and that DNA was missing. This rather forcefully set the historic community into an abrupt about-face. And this is, so Ellis, I just read you what Ellis wrote in 96, where he's like, well, historians don't agree. Here's what he writes in an update to that after this DNA test. In the original edition, I went on to speculate that the likelihood of a Jefferson-Hemings liaison was remote, offering several plausible readings of the indirect evidence to support my conjecture. No matter how plausible my interpretation, it turns out to have been dead wrong.
Yes.
So that's good, at least, right?
Yeah. And you like, and look, pretends to be surprised. You know what I'm saying? Like it was like, oh, word. Okay, cool. Y'all, welcome to the party, y'all.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling us what we knew.
Yes. And that is, I do find it very, the crow that he has to eat there, being like, oh yeah, glorious. It turns out generations of like, oral tradition were right. And we, the historians, were not. Yeah. Jefferson remained ambassador to France until November of 1789, several months after the outbreak of the Revolution. He was an ardent defender and apologist of the Revolution upon his return, which is like controversial because a lot of people are getting killed by the guillotine, right? Yes. There's a lot of ugly shit happening. And Jefferson's attitude, which is actually, I tend to agree with, is like, yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff happening, but like you're kind of ignoring all of the bad stuff that the old regime had to do to stay in power too. Yeah. Like, you know, totally. Like, on balance, I think this is probably going to make the world a better place, right? Mm-hmm. And, that's one of those things. I don't, entirely disagree with this. In An American Sphinx, Ellis calls it revolutionary realism and even compares Jefferson to as a thinker to Lenin and Mao, not without good reason. Again, Ho Chi Minh's got to quote this guy,
Wow. Yeah.
Because he does have this almost religious belief in like the revolution that is coming, for human liberty. He just leaves out certain humans.
Yeah.
Jefferson's colleagues, like John Adams, thought he was insane when he argued that the spirit of 76 and the spirit of 79 had set the ball of liberty in motion to roll around the globe. Yeah. The sheer amount of deception in Jefferson's public statements and arguments makes it impossible to know how much Jefferson believed in any of what he was saying here. Mm-hmm. Ellis seems to argue that when it came to the grand design, his concept of the broad sweep of the future, the role of the English as a doomed counter-revolutionary anchor and the U.S. as a force for freedom, he truly believed what he said. but there's no way to argue he didn't lie about his intentions for his own slaves, most of whom he'd never freed, and about his overall belief in the morality of slavery. If he truly believed it was evil, as he often said, he used it for financial gain and keyly his own comfort, and went out of his way to lie about that. Charles Francis Adams, the son of John Quincy Adams and a diplomat himself, wrote of Jefferson, "He did not always speak exactly as he felt, either towards his friends or his enemies. As a consequence, he is left hanging over a part of public life, a vapor of duplicity, the presence of which is generally felt more than it is seen." And I kind of like that that description of like he's kind of part of our original sin as a nation, not just his owning people, but like the way in which he made lying central, like this kind of obfuscation of reality. Like he's one of these first people doing that, in public life.
Like you said, the distortion field of that Steve Jobs did, like it was like the gift he gave to the country, of like and being so much more sinister in the fact that, like, according to your writings, like, you're doing that.
And that's like, we talk about how like basically everyone can find a Thomas Jefferson to like agree with them in modern stuff, but what I never see him compared to is like, people like Trump, and even people like every president, like the degree to which presidents lie and obfuscate and basically delete reality in order to make it more convenient, which that sort of gets laid out as like, well, that's just part of politics, it's part of modernity, it's part of like our problem, the war on truth as a result of social media and all this stuff. But like, no, it goes back very far. Jefferson is helping to start that.
That's why there should have been a "come on, fam" button. Whole time.
I agree.
Come on, man.
Come on, man. So, Prop, that's part 3. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, great.
How we feeling? We're going to talk about Monticello next time.
Okay, cool.
And then we'll be done, finally.
Man, I'm feeling a little faint.
Yeah.
Take
5.
I feel
20.
like
4.
I'm glad that like millions of people will now catch up to how we feel about Thomas Jefferson. So it's like, you caught up. Finally. Yeah. I'm glad you caught up, because like, don't stop quoting this man. I mean, some of the quotes by themselves are like Yeah, it's a bar.
Yeah.
But like,
yeah.
you're not a hero. You're not a hero,
No.
bro.
No, you're disgusting. You're disgusting.
You're pretty gross.
Boo.
Yeah.
It is. He is. Yeah, he is. And like, I don't know. Part of why we did this now, I'd been meaning to do something like this for a while, is I read that book, Henry Weinsack's Master of the Mountain, and it's just so fucking good. It's such a damning indictment of Jefferson in such a well laid out one. That I just kind of like felt the need to read a lot more.
Yeah, it would do. I mean, obviously, like I'm pissing in the wind here, but it would do our education system such a favor if we would remove the mythos of the founding fathers and understood them like this. And if you understand them like this, you understand our modern politics better. You can articulate your views better. We can understand laws better. Like we would, our democracy would be so much more healthy if you at least were honest about the complexities of who these people were. Like if you was a shitbag, you was a shitbag. You know what I'm saying? Like it is what it is. You just use a shitbag that did an amazing thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, and and to me, I'm like, I feel like as a kid, it's like I would have felt much better about the future if it's like, dude, sometimes trash people do amazing things. And then sometimes, you know, amazing people can do trash stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like just give me that mythos much better than like, oh, these dudes are saints, you know?
Yeah, I think there's almost like a degree to which it's like if you were to say like, hey, you know, this like writer you really liked was actually like a real messy, real piece of shit.
Yeah,
people would be like, well, yeah, especially if it's a TV writer, right? We're all used to accepting that. And it's like,
we know.
That's what Jefferson was mostly famous for. Was he was really good at writing.
Head to your drop off at Veterinary Emergency Group.
And also a piece of shit, you know?
Yes.
Like shouldn't be too hard. Anyway, Prop, you got any pluggables to plug?
I do, man. prophiphop.com on the YouTubes, on the websites, on the socials, Prop Hip Hop. Hood Politics with Prop is we're chugging along. We're getting better. We're putting out video.
Better, faster, stronger.
There it is. We're out here Daft Punkin'.
That's right. That's right.
And yeah, man, and keep supporting the pod, man. You know?
Yeah. Please keep supporting the pod. Listen to Hood Politics. Buy Prop's book, Terraform.
Please buy the book. Yes.
And we have, by the way, folks, we're helping out the Portland Diaper Bank so that low-income mothers can have free diapers. So go to GoFundMe, Portland Diaper Bank, Behind the Bastards. Just type all that in. It'll take you to the thing, and then you can donate money.
Diapers.
And that'll help.
Are freakishly expensive.
Crazy expensive.
And you always need them.
Yeah. A lot of things in our world are morally complicated, but making sure that people who have babies and don't have money don't have to worry about diapers.
Diapers are pretty easy, man. Yeah, that's a pretty easy one, you know?
Yeah. Just help them buy diapers. So, folks, that's the episode. We'll be back in a couple of days.
Behind the Bastards is a production of Cool Zone Media. For more from Cool Zone Media, visit our website, coolzonemedia.com, or check
missed
the name.
Name something that's from in sales about the.
Are there any
mom stuff?
We're back. So we've talked about Dabney a couple of times here, Prop. And he's his childhood best friend. They go to school together. They live at school together. Then Dabney dies at like 30, tragically young. And as little kids, they'd spent a lot of time hanging out in, the vast property, all these thousands of acres his dad owns. Thomas's favorite part is this place called Monticello, this place he calls Monticello, which is like this little mountain. And as a child, he and Dabney made a promise that the first one of them to die would bury the other under a specific oak tree atop Monticello. Jefferson followed up on this promise by having the people he owned dig it, because he's not going to dig a grave for his dead friend. And then he took notes like a serial killer about it.
Weirdo.
But the mountain, Monticello, where his friend chooses to be buried, gets its name from Jefferson, who took the Italian word for small mountain. Now, I've always heard that Monticello was a mountain, and that's what people always say about it. But before I sat down to write these episodes, I hadn't actually looked up the height of the fucker. And as soon as I did, it's 800 feet tall, Prop. That doesn't seem like a mountain to me. That's a hill, right?
That's a hill, yeah.
That's a fucking hill. And I don't know. It's one of those things. There's not actually a universally agreed upon definition of a mountain, right? And this is petty. We're talking about a man who does some terrible things, but it annoys me.
It's kind of the size of a mountain's kind of a vibe thing, but but I feel like, but a mountain when you see it, bro.
You know a mountain when you see it.
Yeah.
Some places, like I think in the UK, I think it's 1,000 feet. It has to be. So it's not a mountain if we're going by like British standards, right?
But obviously, I see you take this very seriously.
I do. I'm livid, Sophie. I've never been angrier.
Because it's
I have been angrier, but I still find it frustrating.
Because it's just like, okay, like if it were anyone else, like if it was just like I would be like, oh, I get it, bro. Like, this your mountain. Like, it'd be fun.
Sure,
like, I'd be like,
you got a mountain. Good
go
for
off,
you.
King. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd be on your side. But like this fool, like, nah, fam, that ain't no damn mountain.
That is a hill.
If this mountain versus hill issue is so important to you, Robert, and it makes you so livid, I just want you to know, I would die on that hill for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
So,
thank you.
I looked into it a little further, by which I mean I read an article on adventure.com, but spelled without the E in the middle of adventure, which points out that both the Oxford English Dictionary and the American English Merriam-Webster Dictionary define a mountain as a landmass that projects conspicuously above the surrounding area. So they do literally say,
now we're going to get into some sad news, but you have to cover really tragic things, and this is a very sensitive subject. And if you're listening to this and you're a friend of mine and you're sensitive about this issue, I'm sorry, but here is something clear as day, which is a Holocaust survivor talking about what's happening in Israel-Palestine. And make no mistake about it. Let's see. What does he say?
I saw in Auschwitz that if a dominant group wants to dehumanize others, so as the Nazis wanted to dehumanize me, these dominant group must first be dehumanized in a way themselves by diminishing their empathy due to propaganda and indoctrination, in order to be able to be as cruel as some were. Okay, but let's say.
And now we're going to do some really Now we're going to get into some sad news, but you have to cover really tragic things, and this is a very sensitive subject. And
like he does. He's not like a professional architect, but he like becomes one. He has like no training, but he drafts blueprints for Monte
Day, which is a Holocaust survivor talking about what's happening in Israel, Palestine. And make no mistake about it. Let's see. What does he say?
I saw in Auschwitz that if a dominant group wants to dehumanize others, so as the Nazis wanted to dehumanize me, these dominant group must first be dehumanized in a way themselves by diminishing their empathy due to propaganda and indoctrination in order to be able to be as cruel as some were. Okay, but the same holds now.
And normally when people are like self-proclaimed architects, it's a bad thing. He actually seems to have been pretty good at this, and he like becomes he designs a bunch of professional buildings later in life. Because I started this series by noting that he was kind of the ancient Roman equivalent of a weeb. Like he's obsessed with ancient Rome the way that like some people are obsessed with Japan over in the US today. So it's based a lot on like ancient Greek and Roman sort of classic designs. And he this is like, at least in the things that he expresses through his writing, Monticello is like the center of his being. He wrote about the property, "I am happy nowhere else and in no other society, and all my wishes end where I hope my days will end, at Monticello." Now, the reason for his happiness, that's always portrayed romantically. He was just so in love with this land and this beautiful house that he built. I think what's actually happening here is a little more sinister, because
it's not that he's just like, I really love this hill.
I really love this hill. I really like my living room. No, it's the real world constantly falls short of Jefferson's beliefs, right? Those beliefs are kind of incoherent, but he is like a dreamer. He expresses these kind of like constant revolutionary fantasies that never quite come true, right? The French Revolution, we can argue if it's better or not, but like it doesn't work out the way everyone hoped it would when it started, right?
Sure. Exactly. Yeah.
And he has this obsession with like Cato's idea of the idyllic free farmer as the backbone of a mighty republic. And also all these weird beliefs about these independent Saxon explorers who'd founded the colonies. And like, none of that's real. And he wants to kind of make these dreams that he has from the things that he's read. He wants to like build, he's kind of the same thing a lot of cult leaders want, right? Like, I just want to go out into the woods and build my own society, a perfect utopia, right? Now, in modern America, you can do that, and people do, but you have to be a cult leader, right? You have to get a bunch of people to like follow you. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to build your utopia. Thomas just owns people. Like, that's what he's doing here, though, right? He is. This really is very much like a cult leader motivation, but just using slaves. Yeah. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah. But... like a place that you could pretend. It's like, you know, and it becomes, like you saying that now, like becomes such a part of the mythos of the South, even like the, you know, like the Lost Cause thing, you know what I mean, that we did, where it's just like, you want this like whistling Dixie, you know, lazy afternoon, sipping seat tea, like kind of lifestyle where we could just hang out and talk about the new Scuttlebucket. It's just a perfect like world on our Sunday tea on the porch while we're trying not to catch the vapors, you know, it's like, you just want that, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's what's happening here. You know, Jefferson starts, you know, has construction started in 1768. He moves there for the first time in 1770 because their old home Shadwell had burned down. They lived at first in an outbuilding until the main house was finished enough to allow occupation. Jefferson occupied the house there with his wife Martha for about 10 years before she passes on and he takes a break to become French for a while. The architecture that he witnessed in Paris inspired further changes to the property when he returned in 1789. And as we noted, he pays for that by using the people that he owns as collateral. His goal when he comes back is to kind of retire from public life and live in Monticello. That only lasts like 3 or 4 years. Like, he's never actually good at, you know, retiring and giving up public life. But when he gets home from France, he's like, I'm so tired of the the weariness of the world. I just want to retreat to
and having to lie all the damn time.
Having to bullshit all these French guys.
It's exhausting. I
want to lie to someone else.
Yeah, totally.
So part of what's going on here with Monticello is he has built for himself, or he has had built for himself, a home that includes, he's almost made a smart house, right? It is filled with ultra-modern amenities and a lot of things that you couldn't actually have in a house.
Our next story is going to be
the
labor
age of like automation and like machines and electricity,
in general,
using like human beings to actually fulfill that role. And I was unaware about this. People always talk about like what an architectural marvel is, but like the idea that he has built a slavery-powered smart house was not expressed to me. Wow,
that's a phrase.
But
that's what it is.
You're right. Yeah.
I'm gonna read you a quote from the Smithsonian Magazine article by Henry.
All this profit that I'm generating is going to Nestle, and I'm struggling to make ends meet and be provided a living wage is really demoralizing.
It kind of breaks my heart that the whole model that cafes operate on is rampant exploitation of workers.
My cafe, I know, made just under $1 million last year, and I made $27,000. I know that I can make a $7 latte in about 1.5 minutes, so in about 5 minutes, I'm making my hourly wage.
Yeah.
Scene hurried back and forth carrying platters of food, fresh tableware, ice, beer, wine, and linens, while above them 20 or 30 or 40 guests sat listening to Jefferson's dinner table conversation. At one end of the tunnel lay the ice house, at the other the kitchen, a hive of ceaseless activity where the enslaved cooks and their helpers produced one course after another. During dinner, Jefferson would open a panel in the side of the fireplace, insert an empty wine bottle, and seconds later pull out a full bottle. We can imagine he would delay explaining how this magic took place until an astonished guest put the question to him. The panel concealed a narrow dumbwaiter that descended into the basement. When Jefferson put an empty bottle in the compartment, a slave waiting in the basement pulled the dumbwaiter down, removed the empty, inserted a fresh bottle, and sent it up to the master in a matter of seconds. Similarly, platters of hot food magically appeared on a revolving door fitted with shelves, and the used plates disappeared from sight on the same contrivance. Guests could not see or hear any of the activity, nor the leaks between the visible world and the invisible that magically produced Jefferson's abundance.
He made a Disneyland.
He made a Disneyland. Yeah, he's got. Yeah,
that's crazy. Like,
yeah,
it's a Disneyland. Yeah,
yeah, it's a Disneyland, and it's all powered by slavery. And I didn't I knew that his life, relied heavily on slavery. I didn't realize he built a magical house.
He figured out how to hide them.
Yeah, you don't even see the people serve because that's uncomfortable, right? It's really awkward to have to look at slavery and
especially as you're discussing the tenets and the nuances of liberty,
right?
You know, so it's we can't just be all out in the open about it.
Yeah, you've just got your magical wine box that keeps being filled with fresh bottles.
Built in Disneyland.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. And in learning this, it kind of brought Jefferson into clarity for me. There's this, how can he write so well about the concept of liberty while still owning people, right? Why did he ultimately fail? It seems like he used to, when he was younger, have some convictions about abolition, and then he failed. Why? And it's I think part of it, at least, is because
KCV says, meet at door, come into the main lobby, give to front desk.
Using the people he owned let him mimic aspects of what we would call a first world lifestyle with 18th century technology. Yeah. Right?
It's kind of rad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of rad to stick a wine bottle into a wall and then a new one comes out.
Yeah. And I think that honestly, that makes him more comprehensible because we all know that shit that's really convenient, have Amazon Prime or whatever, right?
Yes.
Great being able to get a thing the next day and know why you're able to, right? There's a lot of ugliness,
yes.
right? Access to all of these like wonderful luxury items like comes through a lot of like not just environmental waste that's, you know, we are going to pay for one day, but like a lot of human suffering. And we're all pretty, like
I totally love this. And I think this is a big takeaway, because it's like, you know, again, like the answer, you know, motivations of stuff. Again, my organizing premise is like history is just us back then. So like the answer is actually as simple and as obvious as it's not a deep mystery. It's this made my life easier. Yeah. And I know it's wrong, but God damn it, I really could use a new pencil holder. So it needs to come right now. Like I can't wait 2 days. It has to come right now. Yeah.
I understand that this is the great evil of my era, but I'm not walking down to the wine cellar. Right.
At all.
That makes it so petty, but also so comprehensible, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah. Monticello has been a famous property for generations, and its innovative design gets sort of folded in with long-standing myths about Jefferson's genius. A classic example would be this quote from John F. Kennedy during a dinner honoring Nobel Prize winners at the White House. "I think this is the most extraordinary collection of talent, of human knowledge, that has ever been gathered together at the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone." And you run into that quote a lot, because it's that like Aaron Sorkin era, like American mythos, like our great, like these men were really like titanic minds. And it's weird both because like, I don't know. I don't see as much evidence for genius as you do. Like, was he a really good writer? Yeah, absolutely. But
He's
like,
a great writer.
I don't know, genius. I don't even know if I'd call him a genius writer, right? Like, but more to the point, that's a shitty thing for JFK to say to a bunch of Nobel Prize winners, because the 1962 Nobel Prize winners list included John Steinbeck, who was a better writer than Jefferson.
Didn't know that.
It included Linus Pauling, who had attempted to end the nuclear arms race and like made significant progress in doing that. It included Francis Crick, James Watkins, and Maurice Wilkins, who put out a paper describing the helical structure of DNA for the first time. So I actually think that crew is a lot more impressive than the guy who invented a wine cellar powered by enslaved people.
Definitely it's like you say that line and then you stop and look at the room, like when Thomas Jefferson dined alone. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Get it? Because he's the smartest guy ever, because there's nobody else. Get it?
Yeah. You guys just figured out DNA. He figured out how to get wine bottles up to his house without looking at people.
Listen.
But now we're going to go on to our first domestic politics story of the day. Let's get to it. As always, corruption in the United States, but we're a developed nation. We're above corruption. Oh, wait, no.
The buildings were manufactured on site. Now, that kind of makes it sound like Jefferson is like a shop local pioneer. He's an off-grid king, right? Like he's built this, wow, they even made their own nails. That is leaving, that description, the way they talk about the nails, leaves out something important, which is that Thomas Jefferson is horribly in debt. And because he is not going to work what you and I would consider a job, he needs a way to cover his bills with labor performed on the property. Wow. Now, Jefferson's image is as like a farmer, right? Because he's obsessed and he writes a lot like Cato did about this yeoman farmer, right? So you might expect him to have made his living by having slaves work his farm and grow crops, which is what I had always assumed, right? He didn't try to do this, but he's a terrible farmer. Like he's dog shit at his job is the business side of this, right? And he's
business
bad
of farming.
It. Yeah.
Oh, so he out here saying like, I made millions of dollars on my online store and I'll teach you how to do it.
Right.
Where's your store at? I've never seen your store.
Yeah.
And if you're making millions of dollars on the store, why are you teaching classes?
Yeah. He is the old timey equivalent of that guy sitting in his like garage next to a Lamborghini and a bookshelf, being I read a book every day.
Yeah. Do you?
Yelling at you on YouTube to send him money so he can tell you how to do drop shipping or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, basically.
Now, so he does try to make it as a farmer in the business of farming. The first crop he really tries is tobacco. Now, the problem with tobacco is that it's dog shit for the soil, right? If you just are growing a little bit because you want to smoke, you can do okay as long as you like really know what you're doing and like, you understand how to like regenerate the soil and stuff. But like tobacco farming on an industrial level, which is what he and everyone else is trying to do because they want to make money. And this the same thing. Washington does the same thing. A lot of people do, right? The climate is actually changing in Virginia during this period. So like tobacco becomes something that gets done elsewhere. And a lot of them move over to wheat. But the other problem that Jefferson has is that Monticello is, a hill or whatever, but it's like an alpine terrain, right?
Yeah.
And the soil is bad in that kind of a place. You get a hint of this in like they made their own bricks for Monticello out of like local clay. Well, if there's a lot of clay in the ground, it's probably not great for industrial agriculture, right?
Nope.
You kind of want soil more than clay.
Yeah, you can't grow out of clay, guys.
Yeah, it's not very good to do, right? Now Monticello he could have if this was like somebody who was just trying to live off grid, or I mean there was no grid back then, everybody lived off grid, but if there's someone who was just trying to like live in an independent farm and like make all of their own food, you could do that because they had enough land there. But Jefferson needs a business that's going to get him out of debt, right? Yeah. So he gets very excited at first with wheat because wheat is the crop that wheat is in a lot of ways what revitalizes slavery as a profitable industry, right? Because it requires a lot. It's not, for one thing, it's not nearly as bad for the soil, so you can do it a lot more. You can at least have the option of kind of doing it indefinitely without the soil failing if you know what you're doing. It requires a lot less human labor than tobacco, so you can grow more wheat with less people, or as Jefferson sees it, you can free up a chunk of the workforce that you own and have them do other things that make you money, right? While still selling wheat and making money off of that. Wheat is also, there's a more like regimented process to grow and harvest wheat, which encourages more on-the-job training and kind of a more stratified system for like slavery in these communities that you've got. And Jefferson wanted Monticello to function as a community, as like an independent little society, which means he needed blacksmiths to forge and repair tools. He needed people to spin thread and make clothing. There was a tinsmithing operation on the property. There was a cooperage making barrels. And what we see here, I think it's not worthless to like tie this to that common kind of rich white person dream of having your own intentional off-grid community in the mountains. Only like, again, it's not like a cult, right? Because they don't have the choice to be there. Yeah.
And you also didn't
but
do
it is like
stuff.
This.
Yeah.
No, you're just telling people to do it, right? Now, the closer you work to the family, like physically, the closer you are to the house on the top of the hill, the higher your place in the slave hierarchy is, right?
Yes.
Some of the people who are like working in the house or who were doing stuff like being a blacksmith would even receive gratuities, as Jefferson called it. That's what he wrote it out down as, which is basically small amounts of money as like an incentive for them to work, right? Jefferson took a system for human bondage for agricultural profit and he modernized it into a semi-industrial society, still based around slavery, but also much more complex than just kind of these like big farms that had existed previously. And the anchor of profit for Monticello was his nail factory. That's what makes the money at Monticello, is he has like an industrial factory for producing huge quantities of nails.
Wow.
And the best people to make nails.
Jolyn C. says, leave at door. Please do not press the doorbell. Please leave the food on the chairs by the door. Thank you and drive safe.
are little kids.
Oh no.
Part of why he lands on nails as a profit engine is that in the tobacco era, large numbers of children were needed in the field because their tiny hands could kill the bugs, right? Like there was a lot of child labor that was necessary for tobacco.
Yeah.
It's really not for wheat. But obviously, Jefferson isn't going to let all this perfectly good child labor go to waste. He's not excited about this because, like, oh, good, these children get to have a childhood. He's excited because, oh, I can work them in something more profitable, you know?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In his farm book, Jefferson writes this to describe the standard plan for the children born into his property. Quote, children till 10 years old to serve as nurses. From 10 to 16, the boys make nails, the girls spin.
Head to your pickup at Chipotle Mexican Grill, 274 Elm Street.
Labor go to waste. He's not excited about this because, like, oh, good, these children get to have a childhood. He's excited because, oh, I can work them in something more profitable, you know?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In his farm book, Jefferson writes this to describe the standard plan for the children born into his property. Quote, children till 10 years old to serve as nurses. From 10 to 16, the boys make nails, the girls spin. At 16, go into the ground or learn trades.
Sheesh.
And it's, all this stuff in the farm book is a big part of what Winesek based his book Master of the Mountain on. we had a lot of this info about how he's using these, like this child labor system that he consciously crafts for profit, and it gets hidden. Like one of his biographers, basically, he doesn't destroy the work, but he just doesn't write about it when he's like analyzing the farm book for a biography on Jefferson. He like a conscious choice is made by a lot of historians just to not go into as much detail as we actually had about what Jefferson was doing at Monticello, because it's ugly.
Yeah, they're so precious about it. Yeah, like I'm telling you, they're just precious about him specifically.
It doesn't quite make sense, right? Like, why is he the equivalent of the white boy of the month on TikTok, but for all of America indefinitely?
Yes, I think the way they want to portray him as like, I keep going back to an artist, but like a great musician with a heroin problem. That's how they want to portray him, as like, well, he was a genius, he was brilliant, he has this fatal flaw, you know, and like that's tragic, but it doesn't mean that, you know, he didn't do a lot of great stuff. But like, you know, heroin, it could be bad for you, but like you're not harming other people in a way that is evil necessarily. I mean, you can, but like,
multiple families. Come on.
Like you can destroy. Like fundamentally, you're damaged, and that's kind of how they treat it. Like, he had this thing that was like this fatal flaw, where like, no, the man built his own industrial society around child labor for profit. Like, that's what he did. He knew exactly what he was doing. Like, and he documented it. Now, in that... He said that, like, once everyone's 16, they go into the ground or learn trades. Going into the ground means you're on the lowest rung, right, of the hierarchy. You're working in the field, right? And learning a trade, as I said, is like your best path if you're one of these people to like some kind of autonomy, right? Because the blacksmith, you kind of just need to let him be the blacksmith, right? You know? So if you were a boy, before you had a chance to do either of those things, you worked in the nailery, right? You made nails. And that quote I read earlier makes it sound like the nails are just kind of part of Jefferson's plan for a self-sufficient community. But the reality is that they are where his money is coming from for quite a while. They're the most successful profit-earning business in Monticello, and alone paid for all of his family's food. The nailery opened in 1794, and in a 1795 letter, Jefferson explained his reasons for starting it in a letter to a French friend. In returning home after an absence of 10 years, I found my farm so much deranged that I saw evidently that it was necessary for me to find some other resource in the meantime. I concluded at length to begin a manufacture of nails, which needs little or no capital, and I now employ a dozen little boys from 10 to 16 years of age, overlooking all the details of their business myself and drawing from it a profit on which I can get along until I put my farms into a course of yielding profit.
Two things I never thought about is, nails have to be made. And you just go to the store and get nails? Like, I forgot about that. There's that. And then secondly, I was like, what was his farm doing for the 10 years he was gone? That was another thing I didn't think about till right now. Like, what, like, who was, is there any writing on that? Who was there? Like, and why didn't everybody leave? Like,
we'll talk about that. He has white people who are employed as overseers who he is. Some of them are like kind of business partners of his, but like as part of their job in like being a partner, they get a cut of like the profits from the wheat or whatever. But they also have to manage the overseers who live on the property and are responsible for keeping everybody in line.
Overseers,
right?
Yeah. You knew that propaganda, overseers. Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that later because we have some of his letters to his overseers while he's in Paris. So we actually know when he's talking about liberty, some of the things he's directing them to do, and they're pretty ugly.
But
the other things he's doing,
I'm teaching these French. Let's get this ad on.
Let's get this
You're right.
ad break.
You know, I don't know. I don't have a good way to lead into the ads. Just listen to the ads, and we'll come back and talk about nails and crimes against humanity. When he leaves for public, he is just not actually. And we're back. So Jefferson is managing, Monticello from Paris, as we talked about, through like letters and stuff that he sends back. And the other thing he's doing in Paris is he's spending shitloads of money and going even more into debt because he is just not actually capable of living on like a normal allowance, right?
Yeah.
Like, again, for all of his talk about like autonomy and self-discipline, he's never able to like live within his means, which is, I always find funny. When he leaves for public office in 1794, he comes back in 1789, but he leaves public office for a while in 1794. Jefferson is horribly in debt, right? Like he doesn't he goes even more into debt in France, and he doesn't get out of it in those like 5 years where he's back in the US, but he's still kind of like working in politics. And around that time, Jefferson states publicly that he wants to retire, and he kind of frames this as like, I need to get away from Washington. I need to get away from like this cutthroat political world so that I can be a farmer. And he kind of compares himself to Cincinnatus, who is this. Have you ever heard of Cincinnatus, Prop?
No.
He was this. He was a Roman general who like Romans used to like elect a dictator, right?
Yeah.
When they had like a problem, right? Like there's a war. We're getting invaded. Yeah. We need a guy to be in charge for 6 months. Cincinnatus was this like farmer who he got all this power because he was the only guy who could win this war. And then he gave it all up because what he really wanted to be was a farmer. That's what he loved more than anything. And I actually do. That may actually be what Cincinnatus did, but Jefferson likes to compare himself to Cincinnatus.
Yeah.
Whereas like, no one needed you in DC, bro. Hey, and bro. Like, by the way, you suck at farming.
The game needs me, guys.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, if Cincinnatus couldn't grow shit.
Yeah, how about that? Yeah.
Now, the real reason why he like basically goes into retirement is that he needs to get a handle on his debts. He talks to his colleagues in Washington about like, I actually can't keep working in politics. I really got to like fix Monticello. Like, otherwise I'm going to lose everything. Mm-hmm. In American Sphinx, Ellis estimates Jefferson's debt at several $100,000. Now, this was a common state of affair for wealthy, quote-unquote wealthy Virginia planters, right? But it's embarrassing, too. And Jefferson attempted to defray his responsibility for his bad economic situation by blaming his overseers for not hitting the workers enough. Now, it's such a...
Oh, my... continue, but it's such
a... Like, yeah,
all right.
It is. It's such like a, no, it's not that like I'm planning things badly. It's not that I picked a bad location for a working farm, right? Like fundamentally, a lot of this comes down to Monticello is a bad place to do what he's trying to do. Yeah. But like, he can't accept any of that. So he's got to find someone to blame. And it's like, well, my overseers aren't strict enough. That's gotta be, what's causing the problem.
Nobody ever taught him location.
No,
it's just fucking, you just, it's
now
middle
we
management,
see what
these managers,
boomer
they don't
parents
want to
are being
work. Did you
fed
hire
by
all
the
them?
great news source of Fox
You hired them
News,
all,
and
right?
they tell
Yeah.
us
And then,
what's
so this
really
is entirely you.
in America. And we have the glorious, respectable bipartisan.
And I think it's one of those things. He can't admit this publicly. I think he knows, and part of why I think he knows.
There should be no place on any campus, no place in America for anti-Semitism or threats of violence against Jewish students. There is no place for hate speech or violence of any kind, whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or discrimination against Arab Americans or Palestinian Americans. It's simply wrong. As president, I will always defend free speech, and I will always be just as strong in standing up for the rule of law.
Yep.
And restrain ourselves vigorously to the clear profits of the last. And I find that fascinating because he's admitting, well, it seems like none of these big Virginia farms that our whole culture is based on, these huge plantations, basically none of them work, right? None of them can actually make a profit. We're all horribly in debt and it's getting worse every year. Maybe our whole culture is wrong. Maybe we built a bad society. He's like, no, we need more financial discipline.
Yeah. You're not I don't know, guys. Maybe this ain't working.
Yeah, maybe we built a bad civilization and we should start over.
I love it.
Maybe without the slaves.
I hate it, but I love it.
Yeah. So he refused to actually live within his means, and he refused to sell his lands past a certain point because he saw his land as his only real wealth, and that's what he was going to pass down to his kids. He did attempt to make a business out of wheat, but he was dog shit at this, just like he was dog shit at everything he tried to do with farms. Jefferson actually operated 7 farms on his vast holdings, but only about 10% of the acreage he owned was actually under cultivation. So when he hit upon nails as a business, he treated it as a life preserver, making it the focus of his day-to-day exertions. This passage from American Sphinx describes how much of a personal focus Jefferson made of his new nail business. Quote, every morning except Sunday, he walked over to the nailery soon after dawn to weigh out the nail rod for each worker, then returned at dusk to weigh the nails each had made and calculate how much iron had been wasted by the most and least efficient workers. Isaac Jefferson recalled.
Pascal M. says, meet at door. Call me, message me, and I will come down and get it.
That his former master made it clear to all hands that the nailery was a personal priority and that special privileges would be accorded the
Now we're going to get into some sad news, but you have to cover really tragic things, and our next story is going to be labor news and just labor issues in general.
best nail makers. He gave the boys in the nail factory a pound of meat a week. He gave them that worked the best a suit of red or blue and encouraged them mightily. Jefferson even added the nailery to his familiar refrain in the pastoral mode. I am so much immersed in farming and nail making, he reported in the fall of 1794, that politics are entirely banished from my mind. Now, this is not, I think it's worth emphasizing, like a tiny picturesque blacksmith shop.
And now we're going to do some really, really dumb content here.
This is a little factory, right?
Yeah.
It is dirty and it is loud and it is
just
maybe not dangerous compared to the work most adults were doing, but it is very dangerous work for children, right? Like, it makes money though, right? Like, it's actually very profitable. And this is kind of another example of him being a hypocrite, because he writes a lot about like industrialization and like what's happening in you know, back in Great Britain during the early Industrial Revolution is like hideous, and he has all this like these hippie back to the land ethos that he expresses a lot in writing, but the only real money-making venture he was good at was like a nail factory.
Industrializing.
A child-powered nail factory.
Bro, like, come on, man, where's your self-awareness?
The great man.
Yeah, it's just gone.
It also represented an efficiency that he found attractive. He seems to have been bothered on some fundamental level by the idea that enslaved young boys would spend their time idle, having like a childhood or whatever. He wrote that the nailery made him happy because, quote, it would employ a parcel of boys who would otherwise be idle. That Ellis quote I included earlier includes a line about how he would reward his best workers with extra meat, you know, better clothes. But Weinsack points out that he really treated them as part of like a mechanism by which he managed his society. Like, this is a machine to him. That's what's happening here. Quote, those who did well received a new suit of clothes, and they could also expect to graduate, as it were, to training as artisans rather than going in the ground as common field slaves. Some nail boys rose in the plantation hierarchy to become house servants, blacksmiths, carpenters, or coopers. So
you stratify the slaves in a way that pits us against each other. And then you're fighting for scraps.
You're doing like there's that version of it, the evil version. There's also the fact that like you are using this almost as a training program to fill out positions in the rest of the property, right? Like, and that's part of what attracts him. It's so efficient, like this whole this wheel by which he No,
I get it. These are transferable skills, you know, that if he were a decent man would be like, I'm giving you job training so you can go anywhere. You know how to make, you know, you can go anywhere, get a job. You know what I'm saying? Like, but that's not what you're doing because you can't go anywhere.
Yeah, that is right. So 2 months after starting the nail factory, he wrote that it, quote, now provides completely for the maintenance of my family. The first 2 months of labor by his nail boys paid for the entire yearly grocery bill of Jefferson's family, right? That's how big a deal this is for him. In 1796, his gross income from nails was like $2,000, which is, you know, pretty good money back then.
Yeah.
His main competitor, this says a lot, was the local prison.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Wow.
Hold on. The hell is this world? Okay.
It's so fucked up.
Yes.
Yeah, you can see why his biographers for years would like hide this shit, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't match any of the other things that they want people to believe about the man.
They were like, if we take out, you know, the fact that he was a pedophile, an abusive piece of shit, a terrible business owner,
They wrote his life the way he wrote the Bible.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Just gonna remove all the shit I don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something else. So it's probably worth noting that the nailery did involve labor from some young free white boys as well. They were paid 50 cents a day on Saturdays to feed the fire. They were only allowed to work at Saturdays because they had school to go to, right?
Yeah.
So Jefferson is capable of understanding.
Yeah.
Right? Like what the actual decent thing to do would be.
Yeah, I'm not a caveman, guys.
Yeah.
Well, you are.
There is one of the stories here I found is like you get this little piece of like kind of some of the inherent decency of some of the little kids, like some of his kids and grandkids, because his grandchildren were known to volunteer at the nailery sometimes so that the boys that Thomas owned could go take days off to go fishing.
Wow.
So you get little again, other people are capable of treating them like people, right?
Yeah.
Jefferson isn't. I found that interesting.
You gotta, without oversimplifying, but like, you gotta beat the humanity out of that kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the kid looks at him and goes, well, he's a kid like I'm a kid. He sucks. He's there every day.
Yeah.
Dude, look, bro, I can do at least a day, dog. Like, we're just sitting around. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it is.
And then someone has to come and tell you, well, no, because you're not property. They are.
Yeah, they don't need days off. They don't really want them.
Days off, they're fine.
You have to like lie and abuse people to get them. Like, I think it's such an interesting example of just like, well, yeah, these kids just notice that these other kids don't get to have a childhood and did something about it, right? Interesting. The little bits like that you get, I guess, are also maybe one of the ways that these kids get to
head north on Madison Avenue toward Columbus Avenue.
Speak a little bit out into history, like the speech that was denied them, but you have to assume the kind of communication that like led to that. Like even if it was just communication, like, wow, these kids look obviously unhappy here.
Yeah.
I thought about that a lot after reading.
Yeah, such a human moment, you know?
Yeah. So, back during his years in France and when he'd written Notes on the State of Virginia, Jefferson had written at length his belief that black people were not mentally capable of being free, right? That's a big part of like how he defends himself to these like French intellectuals. The success he'd had in turning Monticello into a functioning, complex industrial society made some of his, or semi-industrial society, made some of his French friends who came and visited him at Monticello, like Duc de la Rochefoucauld-Liancourt, basically be like, I know what you said about these folks, but like it seems like they're capable of doing all sorts of very complicated jobs that are everything they'd need to do in order to live independently and free, right?
Seem pretty smart to me.
They seem like they're capable of building an entire society on their own, basically.
You telling me these people the people that built your house are unable to survive on their own?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like they have a lot of the same kinds of skills that we consider skilled labor in outside society. And so like Duc de la Rochefoucauld-Liancourt, who's like one of his friends who visits Monticello, is so impressed that he's like, hey, this is great. This means you can like free these people, right? Like you've taught them all this, so like now they can be free, right, Thomas?
Remember what you said when we was in France about that? Like it seemed like problem solved.
Yeah, so we're doing that, right?
Dewey, right?
Yeah. The Duke recorded Jefferson's response this way, quote, he sees so many difficulties in their emancipation, and he adds so many conditions to render it practicable that it is thus reduced to the impossible. And
it's too hard.
Yeah. Part of why he does that, or why Jefferson's argument is, again, it comes down to race mixing, right?
Yeah.
Like he's like, if we free these people, then they'll inevitably going to like marry and have children with white people, right?
Yeah.
Part of his justification to this guy is like, again, it all comes down to race mixing. He's been doing this for a while, since France. And what's interesting to me is not like the specifics of his belief. On like this kind of stuff and how it ties. I mean, it is interesting that it ties into scientific racism, which Jefferson usually doesn't get blamed for, and he is very much a part of that. But what's really interesting to me is that, like, first off, he's actively doing this thing.
Yes.
That, like, he says is this reason why these people can't be free. And second, it's as a public figure, right? He supports brutal punishments for this. As I noted earlier, when he's revising Virginia's slave code, he proposes that any white woman who gives birth to mixed race children be cast out from protection of the law. But a few years earlier, right after he'd finished Notes on the State of Virginia, he sold one of the women he owned to a white man with the understanding that she would be freed by him and they would live as husband and wife, right? And he was willing to do this. This guy is a friend of his. So you get this mix of like, well, he clearly doesn't actually have a problem with this, but he thinks it's very important in public to have a problem with this.
Yeah.
And
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that bush.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Now, where I think this gets most disgusting is in his public protestations of his gentleness as a master. He would drop lines like, I love industry and abhor severity, right? Basically like, I love it when people are working. I hate the idea of like, God forbid, having to punish, these people. Oh, what a horrible thought, right? And he would regularly in his public writings attack overseers, right? He called them degraded, unprincipled, violent people, which in many cases they were. That's not an unfair thing, right?
Yes.
But he's also hiring these guys.
I was like,
so fucking fake.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is it. You're now like this the Thomas Jefferson I know.
Yeah.
You know, just like about the whole, miscegenation, and then like we're all like, nigga, you have like 29 black children. Like, what are you talking about? And it also brings up an interesting point about how like there was a time that like having a mixed relationship was an act of protest.
Yeah.
That's like such an interesting moment where it was like, no, this is me being a part of the revolution. Such a weird position to be, it's just.
Head southeast on Massachusetts Avenue.
Wow. I don't know. I just think about that stuff. And then publicly, anyway.
Yeah.
Like that's that bull. And then, and the overseer thing, this like, of the many things that are so infuriating, it's just like, not only are you calling yourself a farmer who don't do no damn farming.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Now you get somebody, you get a goon basically, to do the shit that you ain't got the stomach to do anyway, because you wrong. And then you got the nerve to stand by and be like, well, I hate we have to do this. I wish you would just comply. I don't want to have to go get the
Yeah, I hate it, but you really gotta make the money. Though. Yeah.
If you'd have just worked until you died.
I know it's Friday and I hate to do this, but totally. You're gonna have to work forever. Yeah. Like it's interesting. Like again, he gets such a there's so. Many historians, even up to the pretty recent period, are willing to like go to bat about like how relatively nice he is. But Jefferson, not only is he hiring overseers, it's not just that like, well, he hires overseers because everybody does. You have to have someone to watch it for you. He hires overseers and talks about the violence he wants them to do. Right?
Wow.
Make a slight right turn on Massachusetts Avenue, then turn left on Forest Street.
We're going to get into that, but first, here's an awkward ad break.
Dad deserves something really nice for Father's Day. But let's face it, we usually don't do it. Big gifts are for Mother's Day. Picking something up on the way is for Father's Day. Well, let's make Father's Day something this year with the Bartita.
And Jefferson, in Notes on the State of Virginia, which is, again, him trying to defend the United States to France, writes about how these are one of the worst parts of this really cruel, hideous system. In 1791, he ordered his property manager to purchase a load of collars. Winesek, in his exploration of Jefferson's farm book and correspondence, lays out a clear pattern. Jefferson often says the right thing, or at least the less cruel thing, but then acts with as much cruelty as any other master. He cites a 1792 letter by Jefferson to his executive overseer, Colonel Randolph, about replacing a retiring overseer and the need to balance cruelty and goodness. Quote, in his response to Randolph, Jefferson also wrote, "My first wish is that the laborers may be well treated, but what it appears at first glance to be an ironclad declaration of principle turns out to be just what Jefferson said it was, a wish, and it was qualified by a second wish, that they may enable me to have that treatment continued by making as much as will admit it." You see what he's saying there? Like, I want to treat them well, and I hope they make me enough money that I don't have to have them beat. Right? Like, that's what he's saying, you know?
Yeah. Look, dude, nobody, I don't want this.
Yeah.
But, like, if you, like, basically you're choosing it. Like, if you choose not to, like, it's your choice. Like, you're choosing not to be compliant and work hard. Look, if the system works, if you work the system, just.
Right. Yeah, that is exactly like, what he's saying here. I'm going to continue that quote from Winesek's book. First, this was Jefferson's contract with the slaves. I wish to treat you well, but if you do not produce enough, there will be harsh measures. Second, it was Jefferson's contract with himself. Having made this mental compact with the slaves, he could absolve himself from blame for anything unpleasant. The slaves were at fault, right? So he's doing this, he's expressing this because that way he can be like, well, we have this agreement and you guys didn't make enough, right? It's not me having you punished, you know?
There's his through line. His through line is, dang, it's all clear now. His through line. His through line is, I'm going to find a way to absolve myself. Like, whatever we're doing, no matter what it is.
But now we're going to go on to our first domestic politics story of the day. Let's get to it.
I'm going to provide myself an out. And that's what continually what he continues to do. Like, as a politician, as a farmer, as a husband, as a father. Now, in this context, it's like, he's always finding himself an out.
Right.
Damn.
Right. Yeah, that's the guy.
Yeah, that's that guy.
All of this, if it can be made more infuriating, it is made more infuriating by the reality of Jefferson's correspondence with a man named Benjamin Banneker. Have you heard? You know who I'm about to talk
Benjamin
about.
Banneker. Come on now.
Our next story is going to be labor news.
Well, we're not entirely certain, but probably was born to two free black parents in Maryland. Educated as he was educated as a child. He's taught to read. He's taught arithmetic, and he inherits some land, which he farms with considerably more aptitude than Thomas Jefferson ever farmed anything. Right?
Yes.
Now,
my harebrained
Banneker was an early mathematician, and he was in fact so able at mathematics that by the late 1700s he had a popular almanac that Jefferson and many other Americans.
All this profit that I'm generating is going to Nestle, and
you have to think about an almanac as like it's like an iPhone.
Now we're going to go on to our first.
It is the product of intense science that is absolutely necessary for your day-to-day life if you're a farmer, right?
As always, corruption in the
and it's impressive being able to like understand astronomy and all that kind of stuff like well enough to make a good almanac is difficult. At age 21, for an idea of how smart this guy is, when he's 21 years old, Banneker borrows a pocket watch from a friend and carves his own functioning watch
cooler, a Democrat
of wood
accused of
based
accepting
on the
bribes
pocket
in exchange
watch he
for
bought
advancing
us.
interests of Azerbaijan
That like
in Congress.
works his whole life.
Please note
just
that Azerbaijan
has
taken over
right?
Nagorno-Karabakh,
I
which
need
was
to
an
double check
ethnically
my
Armenian
my history, but I
enclave
believe
in
he designed
Azerbaijan
Washington D.C.
Oh, did he? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he designed the roads.
Yeah,
Jesus.
Yeah, like so that was like one of those things that that was one of the
everybody in Nagorno-Karabakh
one of the
just
things.
fled because they're like, we're just going to get exterminated.
He established the borders of District of Columbia. So like he actually designed the roads. Now, granted, they're very annoying now, but that's because they were made for horses then. You know what I'm saying? But he definitely designed them.
You can't blame him for not assuming DC would ever get that big.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So Jefferson had cited, if you remember back to I think our second episode, he cited some of his evidence and notes in the state of Virginia when he wrote out like, here's why I think white people are superior. One of it was that he hadn't run into a black man who knew Euclid, right? Well, here's a black mathematician who is definitely better at math than you, Thomas, right?
State-controlled energy company in Azerbaijan. I mean, look how like easily bribable. Like $600K for a country like the United States is freaking nothing. And Azerbaijan is a massive natural gas producer. So they have a ton of money. And $600K is really not that much to bribe an official. It's crazy what these officials will do for cash. The federal indictment unsealed in Houston on Friday accused Kular, 68, and his wife, 67, of conspiracy and bribery as part of an influence peddling scheme. Okay, so what's crazy is also his age. He's 68. It's fantastic that we have all these old, corrupt individuals just making the decisions for the United States. I love that. That's great.
U.S. Senator Bob Menendez stayed silent as he arrived at federal court on Wednesday.
Oh, yeah, this is Bob Menendez. Oh, again, another Democrat. Yay. Those Democrats really sure be not doing corruption, right? Again, we live in a two-party oligarchy. The Republicans bad, but yes, Democrats also bad.
Where he and his wife, Nadine, pleaded not guilty to a range.
Look, all these people have cameras trying to make their bag. Good for them. I mean, that's kind of what I'm doing, but it's just funny.
Of corruption charges, including passing secrets to Egypt. The judge set his bail at $100,000.
Look at this fat old man determining the laws of this country. Fat, corrupt old man determining the laws of this country. That's great.
$1,000. A day earlier, one of his co-defendants, Egyptian-American businessman Wael Hanna, also pleaded not guilty.
The senator and his... This is about a different case. But again, Democratic corruption. Who would have guessed that? I thought the Democrats were the good guys. They cared about people. Oh, and they're also massively corrupt. Who would have guessed that? So, look at this. So the payments for not the Menendez case, that was a different case, but the payments to the couple went through a Texas-based shell company owned by his wife and the couple's 2 children. According to an indictment, the company alleged received payments from an Azerbaijani energy company for $25K a month. I mean, come on. What are we even doing here? Yeah, so it's just... Yeah, the charges come months after U.S. Senator Bob Menendez, also a Democrat, was indicted on allegations that he accepted bribes in exchange for political favors, including advancing the interests of officials with the Egyptian government. There's a little tweet here. We're going to get back to it, actually.